thanks to Katie Bogenschutz for being here. You guys may have seen Katie on Jay's channel as well as Law and Crime. So thank you so much, Katie.
Thanks for having me. It's kind of a fun way to start a Monday.
Yeah. And thank you for watching my channel. I kept meaning to reach out to you, ask you to be on and stuff. So it's great to have you. Do you want to tell us real briefly who you are?
Yeah, my name is Katie Bogenschutz. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I grew up in Lauderdale by the Sea, which is on the eastern side of Broward County. Broward County also being where Wendi grew up, but on the western side, and she's about 5 or 6 years older than me. So we're both lawyers. We both live in South Florida. We have mutual friends. To my knowledge, I've never met her. To my knowledge, anyway. Or she didn't make an impression anyway. So I moved. I was a prosecutor in Broward County for about 9 years. So at the time of the arrest, I was a prosecutor in the sex crimes unit, and then I moved over to the gun unit. And then I decided to move to Tallahassee to live with my now husband. And I was a prosecutor up here for about 3-ish years. And then I went into private practice, Jansen and Davis, for about 3.5 years. And I just started my own firm January 1st. So if you're wondering why I'm free on a Monday afternoon, it's because I just got out of the jail and I thought I was going home, but I didn't.
Yay, so you were just there.
Yeah.
At Young County Jail. Yeah, how was it?
What, the jail?
Yes.
So there's 2 different ways that you can have contact with an inmate in the Leon County Jail. The first is an attorney booth, which is where you're talking to each other through a glass window, but on a phone, and it shouldn't be recorded. And that's how I was meeting with my client, or my now client. There's also what's called a contact visit, which is where you're allowed to be in the same room. I've done that in the past. And that is how Donna's attorneys meet with her. A lot of times when there's like media and stuff like that you need to go through, audio calls. In this case, there's so many wires that you need to go through. That would be the preferable way to meet with somebody.
I'm curious about your sort of connection to Wendi. Are your mutual friends all lawyers or people who went to law school with her?
So I have multiple lawyers that I'm friends with down there that I was friends with are like mutual Facebook friends and stuff like that. I do know some people who went to JPT, John Paul Taravella High School, and must have been the same year as her, counting backwards. I think my husband graduated the same year as she did from FSU, but they were not close. And in fact, I don't think he remembers her. So she finished out her career at FSU, even though she was, I guess, a visiting student in the University of Miami. So there's some connections there. What really interested me is the difference between South Florida and North Florida. And you could almost write like a full on, there used to be this show on A&E called City Confidential, where it was one crime that kind of explains the city and why the city is the way it is. And this one would be maybe Florida's, to explain the difference between North Florida and South Florida and the places in the middle. Because North Florida is like South Georgia or South Alabama, and South Florida is what you see in the pictures with the white buildings and the sands. And we just got a super chat, or I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's called on StreamYard, but
okay. Thank you.
I was at UM when Dan was up for that job at the law school, and UM was one of the hardest places to get a job at the law school at that time. I would believe it. I mean, UM is a top 30 law school, I think, in the country, or at least top 50 now. I mean, it's been a while since
I thought it was like ranked about 100.
Oh, really? The law school?
Yeah.
Maybe it was.
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, it's like somewhere in the middle.
Oh.
Unless it changed recently. Yeah.
Back when I cared about law school rankings, it was ranked fairly high. I don't know if, I mean, I turned 41 next month, and I went straight through school, so it's been a while. Let's see. But yeah, so today they filed these motions to suppress, a motion to suppress the pretty damning recording of the jail call, as well as a what's called a motion for an Arthur hearing, or a motion to set bond in Florida. So when you are charged with a capital offense, and in Florida, there's a couple of different ways to be charged with a capital offense. First degree murder, the most common way. There's also something that's colloquially known as capital sexual battery, which is sexual battery on a child under the age of 12. Where you would have to, there is a presumption of being held, and that you need to have a hearing before you get a bond on that. There's also multiple other counts, but those are the two general paths you get there: dead body and horrific sexual abuse. I'm so sorry, I didn't realize that was on.
It's okay. This is totally on the fly, guys. So
yeah,
thank you so much, Katie, for being willing to jump on to a computer. So this first thing we're going to show is the motion to suppress, which both Katie and I have just quickly skimmed through it. And we think it's bogus, right? Because she knew she was potentially on a recorded line. So she's just stupid and didn't hang up the phone. There's no expectation of privacy.
Right. And it's not like it's a recording that is going on at her house without her knowledge. I'm assuming she has an iPhone, and those of us who have iPhones, sorry, I'm not trying to show you a picture on my phone, but if you're on the phone call, it shows on the screen. Now, this is back in the end of 23, so I don't know what version her iPhone was. I don't know if she had a brand new one, and I don't know how familiar your viewers are with it, but the most recent version of iPhones, the screen is live at all times. So even if you were to turn off the screen, not turn off the phone, turn off the screen, you would still see almost like a little shadow of the phone call still going on it. So I'm trying to think as to whether that was still or if that was the kind of software that was going on. So but the thought is that what they're trying to say is that there's wiretapping here, and Florida Statute 934 is the Florida statute on wiretapping. Basically what that means is you cannot record an audio recording without the person's knowledge. So Judy is on the air right now, and she is recording me, and it is with my knowledge because I clicked the link and we both knew that's what we were doing. But if Judy and I were on the phone and I was recording our phone call and didn't tell her about it, Florida is a two-party consent state unless the police are involved. So in this case, the phone call would have been going on, except for the fact that nobody was really recording it. It was a machine that recorded it. And that's where I think it kind of fails. That it was a recording that continued. There wasn't any real law enforcement, intrusion into their home. It was just a recording, and she was, she didn't hit the end button, and that's, problematic, but it wasn't really a machine can't invade your privacy. It's something that just recorded. So I think it will end up failing. It is it's an interesting argument on an intellectual level to think about. Well, she thought that the phone wasn't recording anymore. She thought she lost him, but she never hit end. So on an intellectual level, it's an interesting argument. I think it's going to fail. As you can see on the screen here, number 11, at the time of the call, no law enforcement agency had obtained a wiretap pursuant to section 934.07. Now, that's the section under which they obtained the wiretap originally. If you'll remember that there were a bunch of calls that were recorded back in, I think it was 2016. So that was not active. However, at the beginning of the call, it says it's recording. And if you don't hang up your end, you kind of run the risk that it might keep recording. Hate to ramble.
So was this the call where she was talking about looking for a non-extradition country, that she had looked into Korea or China? Or was this also the call where she was talking about how she had had a good life and maybe it's time to end it all, or something about potentially killing herself?
I think it was about having to get Wendi. And I mean, look, I don't know this for a fact 'cause I didn't brush up on this, but I think it was something to the effect of having Wendi come over, trying to get their affairs in order before something happened, whether it was, I guess, the S word or fleeing. So I also think that it was where there was one where she was talking about having talked to Mr. Ashbaum and saying, I don't know if we'll have enough time, but to get to the airport, which I don't think is ethically problematic. I'll throw that out there. That just saying like, look, there's nothing out there right now, but everybody's saying they're coming for you. That's the rumor, good luck.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't think Rashbaum, from what I've heard, did anything unethical, especially if it was just Donna asking him proactively. It's like, hey, do you think I can leave the country?
Is there a warrant out? And he would say, no, not that I'm aware of,
there's no warrant. You're free to go. You might get out of the country, you might get arrested or something to that effect. And
right.
She got arrested.
And she did have actively a defense attorney at the time. I think Maricel something.
Yes, Dusk also.
But usually when, like, I'm a criminal defense attorney now, I represent plenty of people, and I have represented plenty of people where I've emailed the detective or called the detective and said, hey, if there's ever a warrant out for this person's arrest, let me know and I'll just have him turn himself in at the jail. I can understand why you wouldn't want to do that on a first degree murder, but and why you wouldn't want to telegraph that. But I mean, one would assume that as soon as they had the warrant signed, they would be either contacting the attorney or trying to take her into custody. So the fact that they were not trying to do that is a pretty good sign that there was not a warrant out, especially on a first degree murder. That's not one of those ones that you sit on and you're like, they get pulled over at a traffic stop. Great.
Okay, thanks so much. It's really a treat to hear from someone who practices criminal defense, and you've also been a prosecutor for a number of years.
Yeah, I was teaching a class. We do that occasionally. I taught a class on continuing legal education to other prosecutors after the first trial. And as I forget, I've taught several classes, but I know it was on sex crimes because that's like my specialty. And I had said something like, does anybody have any questions for me? And it was relating to my, whatever it was, Williams rule or dangerous sexual felony offender presentation or whatever it was. And the first question was, when are they arresting the mother? And I was like, I knew what they were talking about, but I was like, that's not what we're here for. And then the girl next to her goes, those emails. So, and these are prosecutors that are pulled from other counties. And I distinctly remember that. I was just like, if we could, maybe I should be a little more specific. Does anybody have any questions about my presentation?
Yeah, it's kind of like when recently James, mentor lawyer, said Ira was going to interview a defense attorney in Florida about the Hoyt Burge case. Does anybody have any questions? And the only question I wanted to know was, do you know about this Markel case?
Right.
And what are your opinions on the Markel case? Who cares about who's this Hoyt Burge? I barely followed that. But you mentioned that recently when you were a guest on Law and Crime. So
they asked me if there was if I thought there was probable cause, and I was like, I think there's probable cause if there's enough to convict. Obviously, if you get a conviction, then there's probable cause. I think that my opinion is irrelevant, but I can tell you that other prosecutors thought that there was enough, at least in other, not this office. Nobody in this office would ever talk about it, but I distinctly remember other prosecutors going, when are you doing this?
Well, do you mean in terms of prosecuting Donna or
Yeah,
Wendi?
when they were
Oh,
prosecuting Donna. They were,
mhm.
when are you arresting the mother? That was the first question. And I think they were all horrified by the emails. And if I were the defense, I would be trying to figure out some way to keep those out, especially yeah, I don't know if
Like
you
if you dress
know,
up your kids
Jewish,
in
but
Nazi
that part.
uniforms and brought them down here, I could care less if it were an act of defiance.
Yes,
We'll show
in
you
that
first
voice.
that he's not in control. Okay, so I have those lines memorized. This is how pathetic my life is, right? Just like memorizing Donna Adelson's emails and stuff. But it's funny that
We all need a
attorney.
hobby.
What?
We all need a hobby.
Yeah, yeah, just like hating Danny was the Adelson's hobby, according to the cats. Yeah, but I don't think it's just really the emails. I would say all these phone calls, not just this phone call that they're trying to suppress, but also all those calls between her and Charlie and her and the undercover. So those are really, really damaging.
Mm-hmm. And the one that after they figured out what Charlie's defense was going to be, and there was plenty of time to go back and figure out, to go back through the wiretaps to figure out what else they had on there to disprove that. I mean, that's where they started talking about, like, well, he could have been killed by a drug dealer. He could have been.
Yeah, I think that was in a text. That was in text
Was
that
it a text message?
Charlie. Yeah, like, oh, it looks like he didn't pay his drug dealer, or
Right.
maybe he didn't pay his drug dealer. I mean, it's just crazy. It's like they just dug themselves into deeper and deeper holes because neither one of them could keep their trap shut. So
Nobody ever commits a murder thinking they're going to get caught. So nobody ever commits a crime thinking they're going to get caught. Everybody thinks they're better than the cops, better than the prosecutors, better than the jury.
Yeah. Well, let me scroll through this real fast because there's just a few more pages. Let's see. Okay, so this is nice, but ultimately, I think the court's conclusion is going to be totally different and just say it was totally unreasonable for her to think that this was a private phone call. And it goes against common sense.
Well, especially when she didn't hit the end button. I think that's probably what it's gonna, if you wanted to make sure it wasn't recording anymore, why not hit the end button?
Exactly.
I'm assuming she had an iPhone, and Judy, I don't think you have one, but there's a big red button in the middle of the phone when you're on an iPhone on a phone call that you hit end on, and it's about the size of a quarter. So it's there. And I think we'll probably hear some testimony about whether she had the always on feature on the screen as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, she definitely had iPhone because I think it was a search warrant that mentioned that being seized. So let's see.
That's right.
Okay. So, I mean, do you agree that these are just typical motions that the attorneys sort of feel obligated to file just to do something?
I think that the motion to suppress is interesting because I feel like I have not seen something similar to this where, I mean, it's possible because nobody's ever been, forgive me, dumb enough to continue talking about fleeing the country right after their son clicks off the phone without hitting the end button. But it's entirely possible that that's the case. And also keep in mind that we've only been recording jail phone calls probably for the past, I know that 2008, it was going on. I want to say probably since about 2000. The amount of time that you have for these cases to come up on appeal and to work its way through the appellate process and then to create case law is smaller. So I think that this motion to suppress is probably going to make, while I don't think it's going to be successful, I do think it's going to create new law on this point, because I am completely unaware of a case that is similar to this, where a recording continued without the knowledge of the recordee.
Mhm. Okay, interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this off the screen and let's show the other motion. This is where Donna is saying she's been mistreated and she has tons of medical problems and people have abused her.
Yeah.
So let's take a look here. Have you had time to look at this one?
I have, well, I can briefly discuss what an Arthur hearing is. In order to find somebody guilty of a criminal offense in the state of Florida, well, anywhere, it's beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. In order to hold someone no bond after they move for an Arthur hearing, the judge would have to find that proof of the crime is evident and the presumption of a guilty verdict is great. So proof, evident, presumption, great. Those are the standard words. So it's a higher standard than beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt that the judge would have to find. Now, even if the judge were to find that proof is evident, presumption is great, he could decide in his discretion to set a bond in a capital case. In this case, I think it is highly unlikely. There's also the fact that there was some evidence of flight, even though it wasn't flight, having known that there was a warrant out for her. It was certainly flight when you couple it with that phone call, it was certainly flight with the knowledge that, and a one-way ticket, to be fair, even if the phone call got dumped somehow. But it's flight with the knowledge that this was potentially coming down the pike. So I would imagine that being a flight risk, that the state could even file a motion for pretrial detention based on that her being an exceptional flight risk, even if the judge, I don't know, decided to eat a big bowl of crazy and give her a bond, which knowing Judge Everett, I don't think that will occur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look at this. I just noticed they said she attempted to vacation in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Isn't that a nice little turn of a phrase? She was just trying to vacation there, a country that does not extradite.
Well, I will tell you that my father-in-law served in Vietnam and wants to return because, quote, it is beautiful. And I was like, that's what you took away from the Vietnam War?
Really? I thought he'd be
go back because it was so beautiful. And I was, all right, So I'll take his word for it at this point.
Okay, so this is where they're talking about Donna's medical condition. They allege she has hearing problems. And I was thinking, well, it's too bad she totally ruined her relationship with her oldest son, who's an ENT. I had no idea she had to have her extremely small ear canals cleaned out with proper equipment every 3 to 4 months.
What? It's not
Never
like
heard of
YouTube. That's got to be like very similar to those weird YouTube channels where they're like cleaning out earwax.
Yeah, with wax or something.
Yeah. And they find some way to monetize it. It's great.
Yeah, that sounds disgusting.
Pre-existing medical condition. So there's not a lot of facts here.
Severe pain from a pre-existing medical condition in her back and legs that can't be relieved by the medical care available. Well, she was high-stepping it through the airport, as other people said. She probably had to walk at least a mile, maybe 2 miles
in
to
the
get to the squad car when she got arrested.
So we have a question in the chat from Mia Wallace that says, would have been most prudent in looking out for the best interest of his client. With Donna's counsel, should he have advised Donna that fleeing to Vietnam would present poorly? So at the time that Dan, I'm assuming you're referring to that, at the time that Dan advised her, he wasn't representing her. So I think, I don't know if he was really in a position to be able to say, hey, when I switch teams and represent you, or if I were to switch teams and represent you, it would look bad.
Well, at that point, I think Donna was desperate anyway. So, the only good piece of advice probably would have been you should buy a return round trip ticket then if you're going to go. Because what if they arrest you right there?
Of all the ways to save a buck, that was not it.
Yeah. So, yeah, interesting question. Yeah. Sorry, I haven't been checking the chat box. So
I just saw that one come. I saw it come up earlier and then come up again. So I decided to.
Okay. Donna's earlobes look frighteningly large. Wondering if they're weighing down her ears and causing problems in her ear canals. Yeah. Well, I guess we should be sensitive, though, because there are prisoners who have medical problems that don't get good treatment in jail or prison. So since you're familiar with the procedures there, what do they do for people with chronic health problems?
Well, I'm assuming she's trying to say that she's got some kind of a wax or obstruction issue, and that's what hurts or is obstructing her hearing. They do have the ability to bring people to doctor's appointments. In fact, recently I went to I went to my doctor's appointment. There was a pregnant lady that was in shackles that was being walked in by two Leon County deputies because she was in custody and pregnant. So, they have the ability to bring you out to a specialist if that's required. As far as the ENT issue, that's never come up specifically for me, but I can tell you that people who are hard of hearing in court, there are special, you can get a headset that will amplify things for you. And the better that technology gets, the better that gets too. So, just because you're deaf or blind doesn't mean that you're not on trial. So there's ways to get around that.
Yeah. And on the issue of medical specialists, though, who chooses what specialist the prisoner gets to see?
I think that's an internal thing with the jail. I know that there are, so if you wanted to bring it up in court, my question would be, did she grieve it? And that's GRIEVE. There's a grievance procedure. Like if you feel like you're not getting appropriate treatment in the jail, you can, and so the verb would be grieve, but you can file a grievance. And the jail then has an opportunity to respond to that. So you saw that with, where she was like requesting socks and stuff like that in the past, where people were pulling all of her jail records. I would assume that the hearing issue, unless you've got evidence that there's some kind of an infection, she's in pain. In fact, I think that there's like drops you can use for that stuff. For the hearing thing. My concern with the hearing thing would be, well, she's due process of law should be afforded to her. So if she cannot hear what's going on in the courtroom, or she cannot hear what her attorneys are telling her, and they're having some communication issues, that's what I would be worried about if I were on the prosecution team, because I want to make sure that there's always going to be an appeal in this kind of case, but let's try to narrow the issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there also the threat that Donna could eventually sue the prison agency for failure to provide adequate medical care?
Yeah, she could do that under a civil rights kind of a framework in the state. The Florida, or more often than county jails, the Department of Corrections in Florida get those quite frequently. But an earwax, without knowing more about what these medical conditions are, it's really difficult to determine whether there's any there. That and the judge is also going to take into consideration the seriousness of the charge when we're considering whether somebody should be released for a medical issue. So it's I would doubt it in any of these circumstances, particularly for somebody who already showed some kind of propensity to flee.
Mhm. Yeah. And plus, I'm thinking, the best specialists are not going to have some sort of arrangement where they go to jails to see prisoners, right? So she's probably not going to be able to say, hey, there's some doctor here that I want to see because he's the best for breathing problems or ENT or
Right, but
whatever.
we're not talking about like a super rare form of cancer here. We're talking about like what I assume is earwax, right?
Yeah, because her ear canals are so small. I guess.
Right. I would assume that this is not the first time this has come up in the Leon County Jail, and that either somebody went to an ENT or drops were provided, or there was some kind of procedure that was able to be performed in the sick bay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So she's saying that the doctor just kind of brushed her off and said he or she couldn't even listen to her chest because that's not the reason we're here. And you need to get another appointment with a physician's assistant. Then she cut her arm on a rusted metal bar on the machine, washing machine, and
didn't have a
there
Band-Aid.
was no Band-Aid. She had to use toilet paper so the bleeding would stop and fill out a sick call form to request a Band-Aid. Okay, but there were no sick call forms. Okay, finally someone sent her a Band-Aid and gave her the sick call forms.
So when you're representing somebody on this serious of a case, so it's a first-degree murder, if she goes down on it, it's a life sentence. Life is life in Florida. There is no parole. If you hear somebody that's paroled in Florida, it's because they were sentenced in the late 90s at the very least. So when you have somebody that's potentially going to be sentenced to life, it's you kind of want to dot all your I's and cross all your T's as the defense attorney, and it's kind of a balancing test for you as the lawyer. Like, I don't want to look ridiculous, but I also don't want somebody to be calling me ineffective. And being, if you've ever gone to an ineffective assistance of counsel hearing, it's basically an airing of the grievances against the defense attorney about everything that you did wrong and everything that they disliked about the trial and everything that you should have done that you didn't do. So I know it sounds like we're being incredibly petty here on the defense team. I don't know if I would have gone the Band-Aid route, but let's just all have a little bit of grace for them because they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's. And I'll tell you what I told multiple, sex crimes victims of terrible crimes whose defense attorneys were filing crazy motions. I mean, I was a sex crime designated for sex crimes for 8 out of the 12 years I was a prosecutor. You want them to have a competent defense attorney. We only want to do this trial once, go through the motions. They deserve every protection of the law that they should have, no matter how silly you think it is. We need to hear them out. We need to hear this Arthur motion with a clear head, not make fun of it, and just appreciate the fact that they're doing their jobs. And I'm sure the internet will roast me for that one, but they're doing what they need to do. Otherwise, they're going to be back here in 5 years testifying about it.
Yeah, that's right. Now that you're on the defense side, you can sympathize more with the defense attorneys.
Well, I was raised by a criminal defense attorney. So.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
My mom was a prosecutor. My dad was a criminal defense attorney. They met in the courthouse. I was going to be there.
Oh, okay. So I'm sure you heard about tons of cases and all sorts of like courthouse gossip type things all the time.
Yeah, and it's also like, it's just, just understand that this is what they need to do. And you would almost rather them be overzealous than not zealous enough.
Mhm. Okay. Well, what about this? Now they're saying that it's hard for Donna to communicate with her attorneys because there are too many people around and there's like bad connections, background noise. Um, Apparently, she says there was a guard who was listening in. There was a guard standing over her,
Listening
listening to her phone call.
Now,
So,
I'm assuming she's referring to all the inmates, or most of the inmates. Depends on. For some reason, my clients always seem to have broken tablets. I don't know if that's a thing, or if maybe they're the latest ones in, get the worst tablets. But they're on a tablet. They have like a little headphone thing, and they can make phone calls through that. It doesn't mean that you're left to your own devices at all times. And when she's making these phone calls, you as a defense attorney can register your phone, whether it's your cell phone or your office phone, with the jail to say, hey, this is a legitimate defense attorney's phone. Do not record this. And instead of at the beginning of that recording, when Securus is telling you, this call will be recorded and monitored, it says this call will not be recorded and monitored. This is a private call. So, and I've done that with my cell phone, which I basically use as an office phone at this point. And I always double check at the beginning of the phone call. I was like, they said not recorded, right? Make sure it didn't get on the wrong list. So I can't tell you what this hovering at her thing is. But I mean, guards, there's going to be guards in the unit. And if there aren't guards in the unit, then she'd be able to say, hey, these guards aren't keeping me safe. The other inmates could potentially harm me. So it's a slippery slope either way.
well, as a defense attorney now, would this be something that you would mention in a motion, that it's too noisy, the connection is bad, there was a guard listening to her?
I mean, I get why they're raising it, but they also have the ability to have contact visits with her. And, let's say you have a client who lives out in Tallahassee is surrounded by a lot of rural areas. Most of the time I will ask people, like if I know they don't live in Tallahassee proper, I will ask them, how's your internet? Like, how good is your phone reception on your cell at your house if you don't have a landline? Because sometimes, there's areas that are just dead zones in North Florida. I don't see how that's any different than living in a dead zone and having to go to your lawyer's office to go through the case because you're not getting a particularly good reception at your house. So I don't know if I don't really think that's going to be a thing, but I get why they're making the argument, because they are trying to protect themselves. They're trying to protect the record. They're trying to protect their client. And we should all be okay with that. And I say that as somebody who, as a former prosecutor, that's fine. That's their job. We want them to do this. If there's going to be a conviction, it's going to be one that sticks, in other words, as opposed to one with Charlie that looks like it might be in some trouble.
Okay. Now, what about this lack of sleep? I kind of feel like if this is true, well, everybody in jail is putting up with this. So why should she be able to get out of jail because of this?
Yeah, it's difficult to nighttime medication distribution, sleep commences. Not sure what that means.
That just means like she could go to sleep earlier, but she's claiming that she can't even sleep until about 1:30 because there's so much going on, so much disruption.
Well, the good news is she's got a fairly free day, doesn't she?
Yeah, it's not like she has to go to
work. I think that's, I just see the message. It's jail Karen. But look, it's a thing. They're not, it almost reminds me of like being in the hospital after I had a baby and they're like waking you up every 2 hours and you're just like, I swear to God, if this happens one more time. And they have to. So, they have to check on the inmates. She's trying to complain that the other inmates are keeping her up. I don't see how that's the jail's issue. that's one of the problems with being in jail. And to quote Judge Everett, our learned jurist, jail sucks.
Is this true though, that they wake up for breakfast at 3:30?
I don't know if that's actually, you know what? I will ask. I have to go back in there the next couple of days. I will ask one of my clients if that's the case. I mean, I think it's like 4 or 4:30. Really, they're working around shifts in the jail with the there's lockdown at, I think, like it's like at 4 or 4:30. There's a lockdown, and then they're out of lockdown around 7. And I think that's for the shift change. And I believe there's another shift change similar in the morning. There's 3 8-hour shifts for the jail, but I'll have to double check as to whether these times actually hold up post COVID. Because I mean, they're running a smaller. They lost quite a bit of personnel over there. I've seen a lot of brand new people come in, so I would want to ask one of the guys that's in custody. And actually, I'd probably ask one of the females, because fewer females than men in the jail.
Okay. Yeah, because it does sound pretty awful to have to wake up at 3:30 to have lunch, and then breakfast 3:30, lunch at 9:30, and then dinner at 6. That seems really bizarre.
That seems like a very large break, 9:30 to 6.
Maybe it's a typo.
Could be. I thought dinner was more like 3 or something like that, because I can tell you from having a murder defendant in another jail, they used to just open the door when I was meeting with him and hand him his lunch or his dinner, the tray. And I was like, all right, I guess do you want to eat your dinner? And he's like, this is terrible. I don't want it. So there's also commissary, and I get the feeling, and as you've heard about Charlie, there's, you can get ramen, you can get, there's a really interesting, like knowledge passed down from some inmates to other inmates, that I actually told one of my clients who was in there for a year to write it all down so he could write a book at some point, where there was a way to make sriracha sauce, or I don't even know how to say that,
that's right.
Is it? Okay. Yeah.
Sriracha.
Out of like Fritos and some kind of like Dorito powder or something like that. And he was like, yeah, it was really good, shockingly. So, I mean, they have their own ways to, they can eat when they feel like it. I mean, there's commissary, and Donna certainly probably has money in commissary. I can't imagine she wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, this thing about lying on the floor without clothing for more than 50 days. Well, I remember she was in that turtle suit, but it seemed like that was only for a week or 2. I can't remember, but I do remember she showed up in this red prison suit for an appearance by video.
Yeah.
After.
Placed in a cell with a mattress on the floor where she had to lay without clothing. So I'm assuming they're talking about in a turtle suit or another suicide prevention type outfit.
Mm-hmm. Is that normal?
Well, I mean, I think that it's normal when they know you've threatened to kill yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talk about lawsuits. If we're under the impression that you might kill yourself and we don't do anything about it, we're going to get sued. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. And I get the feeling they probably had multiple psych evals and stuff like that they made her take under, continue doing before they would let her out of the turtle suit and the I guess suicide, with suicide watch. The other thing is that you would like to be able to say that it doesn't matter that it's a high profile case, but we've had deaths in the Leon County Jail. I mean, even just natural deaths, because people die every day of non-neglect reasons. But in a high profile case where she's this elderly and has, presumably some age related health problems, if any of this, even a modicum of this is true, she's going to get special treatment because they know. I mean, and for the fact she's incredibly litigious. Look at the family's history too.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, trying to keep track of this. Okay, so then she talks about how there's a prisoner who ran her hand up her entire spine from just above her buttocks to the area of her neck. The inmate asked her if she liked it. And in response, Mrs. Adelson, very frightened, began to scream, which caused the aggressor inmate to leave the area. So, have you seen the shower facility
No,
at that jail?
I have not, but it sounds like someone came onto her and she manifested her intent to not participate, and that person stopped. There's also what they might be trying to travel under is I think it's the acronym is PREA. I can look it up, but it's posted at all the facilities like Prison Rape Elimination Act, I think, PREA.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. So basically, see something, say something. There's procedures to go through to grieve something like this. I would assume that she did grieve it. File a grievance and let them know about it. But I'm sure that there's stuff that'll back this up.
Well, so if somebody in jail has a problem with another prisoner, then what can be done to separate them or get them away from the aggressor?
So there's multiple pods being areas where inmates can be kept. There's pod A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M. I think it ends at M. I'm not 100%. So what is that? 15? Now, as far as the women go, I'm unaware as to how many women's pods there are, because obviously they're not going to mix males and females together for reasons that should be obvious. But I would assume they could put her in a different pod. They could also put whatever sexually aggressive inmate is doing those things. You could put that person in solitary if that's what they're doing. You could put Donna in solitary if that's what's occurring. In fact, given her age, I mean, she's got to be one of the only inmates that's in their 70s in the female portion of the jail. Maybe she just ends up in solitary anyway, if you want to make sure that nothing happens to her. And this is such a high profile case. I could see the sheriff saying, yeah, you want to know what? If you got a problem with any of this stuff, we'll just put you in solitary.
Yeah, especially since she's always calling her lawyers and telling staff supposedly that she's going to tell her lawyer, like when she didn't get her chair.
Oh, I do see that we have a comment that says she's in solitary now, but I think she was in solitary because of some fight that occurred that was recent.
Hear that?
She was moved to solitary, but I mean, she could be permanently in solitary.
Oh, okay. Well, all the better to rehearse to get ready for trial, I think, if she's by herself. Okay, let me scroll on through. Okay, so she's saying somebody jerked her left arm violently. And then a much larger inmate told her she knew Mrs. Adelson got canteen. And from now on, she was going to get canteen for her too. Ms. Adelson was scared for her life and what more physical harm could come to her if she didn't comply. So then this person started telling her what canteen packages she wanted on a weekly basis. And this
So
is
some kind of pay
Adelson.
protection, I'm assuming.
Mhm. Okay. So what do you think? Does this sound credible to you? I mean, we don't know what happened, but what do you think?
I've had multiple clients tell me that they have been approached by other inmates in like a pay for protection kind of a thing. And I think that I think it's possible. I think that it may well be credible, but I think the solution to that isn't to release her. It's probably to put her in solitary. I mean, permanently. I realize she's in there now because of some incident and she's in there for her own protection. I don't know if they would decide after a certain period of time that she could go back to regular population. Solitary sucks though. I mean, sucks more than the regular jail. I mean, you can hear Charlie complaining about it. Basically, it's 23 hours a day. You never see anybody else. You get like 1 hour of rec time. There's no interaction. And there's only so many things you can do on your tablet before you start going a little crazy.
Yeah, that's where he was complaining about the blood and SHIT on the
Right,
walls.
exactly.
There's nothing to do. Okay. Well, yeah, so this does sound pretty horrible if it's true, because we don't want her to be physically assaulted or abused in the jail.
Right.
Let's see.
Punishment is prison or, incarceration, not torture. That's, a U.S. constitutional principle.
Okay. So she's also saying that her legal materials have been tossed out of her storage bin, with hundreds of pages being tossed about. Guards have commented in the presence of other inmates about her perceived wealth, which led to additional requests by other inmates for her commissary. So, is there any punishment to the other inmates if they did, in fact, assault Donna? Like, what happens to them?
So I have seen inmates get charged with battery on a prisoner, which is interestingly enough, yes, you can be charged with additional crimes while you were in custody in the jail. Granted, as a prosecutor, I got assigned quite a few of those, and they're not fun to prove because of the quality of your witnesses for that. But you can pick up additional crimes if that's something that, and it does appear to be some form of extortion. The question would be proving it. And then the state would have to pick up Miss Adelson as a victim. And then she would have to testify. And, it's a whole can of worms there. If she's asking to report a crime, it probably needs to be assigned to a different state attorney's office because this one has a conflict. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. If there's any kind of a criminal investigation, I would assume that it needs to go probably to our neighbors to the west, the 14th Judicial Circuit, which is Bay County, Panama City area, and the rural counties directly north of that.
Okay, so this part of the motion says she was very reluctant to report these assaults because of the fear of retaliation. And it says she spent $1,150 on the separate canteen since October. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm assuming there's records of this, and like I said, I've had other clients of mine. Now, granted, they were male. Tell me about this, like pay for protection. Here's what you need to do. You need to give me, X number of packets of ramen or whatever equivalent per week. I've heard of it before.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's right. So she has been put in solitary confinement since February 3rd. And so, I mean, I kind of still feel like, what makes her so special, because I think a lot of other people in jail have had to put up with this stuff too. So So ultimately, they're trying to get her out of jail because of these things.
Because of jail. Because jail bad.
Okay, it says she's no risk of harm to the community. She's a 75-year-old woman with physical impediments, no criminal history, no disciplinary issues.
Wasn't there a spoon
allegations.
situation?
Huh?
Wasn't
What?
there a situation with a spoon?
Yeah, where she was like, well, and plus, wasn't she also disciplined for using the washing machine when people weren't supposed to be using the washing machines? So,
possible.
yeah, thanks to True Lifestyles for getting those records, and she's working on trying to get some more records too. Yeah, so not a flight risk. Give me a
But
break.
he's still on a no-fly list.
Yeah, jeez, not a flight risk when she was trying to leave the country to a non-extradition country. Right. Okay. I think she does have some.
And can I say something about the non-extradition country part of it? The United States will get you back. Okay? Just because you are saying you're going to a non-extradition country or a country that does not have a treaty with the United States for extradition, I can tell you it took 13 years, but I got somebody back from Brazil, and Brazil is notoriously terrible. Now, granted, it was a pedophile who was teaching school in Brazil, and I think they were just like, could you please take him back? But we will find you. We will get you. The question I have with Ms. Adelson is her age and infirmities, and this has gone on long enough, and giving her a couple more years to run before we catch her is probably going to end up with justice denied. But Vietnam, there are ways to leverage the power of the United States in order to get people back from Vietnam. We will get you. The U.S. Marshals are incredibly good at what they do.
Yes, that's what I remember people saying a long time ago when Donna first got arrested. It might have been, I'm just guessing, maybe it was Dave Ehrenberg or one of the other attorneys who commented and said, oh, maybe it was Campbell himself who said that.
We will get
even if she had gotten to Vietnam, they still could have potentially have taken her back, but it would have just involved so many more steps and get the feds involved, a lot more hassle and expense.
I think my guy from Brazil, he was actually on the last episode of America's Most Wanted, if you can imagine that. One of the last episode before it shut down. I guess they may be back up again. But back in 2011 or 12, something like that, his name was Kenneth Craig. But we extradited him from Brazil, and I think that he sat in custody in Brazil for like maybe 2 or 3 years while he tried to fight it, and then the U.S. Marshals went down and picked him up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is just them citing some case law.
Jenny, that's our old sheriff in Broward.
Oh, okay, so you're familiar with these cases?
No, I just you're suing the sheriff. See, you're suing the sheriff's office in order to, because the sheriff's office runs the jail. So, and interestingly enough, I cut class in law school to attend Ken Jennings' sentencing. So he
interesting.
Yeah, he resigned as sheriff and went to federal prison, which is a whole
okay, did not know that.
I know whenever I see that, where I'm like suing him because he was technically in charge of the jail.
Okay. So this kind of brings to mind Charlie's Arthur hearing, where the judge just flat out said, nope, you're staying in jail. So I don't see any chance of Donna being let out either because of the nature of the charges and the fact she was arrested at the airport.
Right. And she also manifested an intent to maybe try to kill herself. So maybe she could be released and, justice could be denied that way too.
Mhm. Yeah, that too.
I mean, she
Okay.
really did make it quite a bit worse for herself between the trial and her eventual arrest.
Yeah. So to the extent that she's complaining she couldn't wear clothes for 50 days, well, if it was that long, it was because of what she had said on that phone call. Okay. So let's see. So I don't think this is going to be granted either. Okay, her health is failing. She's in constant pain. She cannot hear normal discussions, much less any reduced level speaking with counsel at counsel table at trial. Well, she seemed to be able to hear everything at her hearings,
And
even
react to
on
it.
Zoom.
Yeah. And react to it occasionally inappropriately.
Yeah. So it says then she has no access to interaction with other friendly inmates, art classes. Oh, boohoo. Yeah. Any other human contact whatsoever, appointments with attorneys accepted. Well, good thing her attorneys are in Tallahassee, so she could probably see them all the time. Yeah.
So I having just been in the jail, the art classes thing, there's art up like the walkway that I take to go, or and that any defense attorney would take to go visit their clients to a set of elevators that take you to the pods. The hallway has inmates art hanging on the wall, and some of it's quite good. So, and the art classes, I don't know if they're any good, but there's certainly some talent in the jail. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. So isn't that funny that Harvey is offering to move up to Tallahassee to live with Donna until her trial? Geez, they all thought Tallahassee was such a god-awful, horrible place to be.
I thought
But
he
now,
couldn't get home without her.
yeah, how's he going to get there? Well, maybe one of the friends will drive him. So, yeah, so they want to give her electronic monitoring, and she and her husband would live in Tallahassee. The location will only be shared with the court, the state, the defense, and the pretrial release officer.
I think that part's fair.
Yeah. Curfew from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. No travel outside Leon County. That sounds like such special treatment.
So I am aware of a first-degree murder for hire case where the defendant was released on bond in the state of Florida. It was so the homicide itself actually occurred when I was in high school, but in Broward. But I think the defendants were not charged until about 2006, 7, 8, something like that, when I was in law school. And it is State versus Moscatello. It was actually the killing of the founder of Miami Subs, Gus Boulis. Was a homicide that occurred in Broward County. And Mr. Moscatello was eventually released on bond with electronic monitoring. And he was an older man, obviously of Italian descent. And there was this theory that he was a mob member, and he did get a bond. Of course, he didn't try to go to Vietnam, and he didn't manifest an intent to kill himself. But part of his, I do recall that part of his presentation was that he had some serious heart issues that needed treatment outside of the Broward County Jail. And he also had multiple family members that would put up their homes and stuff like that. But I do, and it was a first-degree murder for hire. There were multiple co-defendants, as in this case. They weren't going at them piecemeal like they are in this case, but he was out on bond for, I want to say, several years. In fact, now I'm curious and I kind of want to look it up.
Geez, so now you got me thinking maybe the judge will let her out. What do you think?
Just because once it happened doesn't mean it's going to in this case. I mean, anything's possible. It's what you learn from state criminal law. Anything's possible. Like my ability to be shocked, gone.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you know these attorneys who are representing her?
I don't think I've ever met Jackie Fulford. She was on the bench prior to, I practiced in Broward up through 2018. Interestingly enough, I was in the gun unit when Parkland happened. So I got a verdict February 13th of 2018 and never tried another case the rest of the time I was there because nobody wanted to pick a jury out of Broward County right after Parkland happened, especially on gun cases. That's understandable. But I believe she was off the bench sometime, like I know she was off the bench before I got up here. I want to say like maybe 15 or 16, something like that. I do know Josh Zellman. He's a good lawyer. I went against him as a prosecutor. I don't believe that he and I have actually tried a case together. I don't think that he and I were on opposite teams when I was a prosecutor. I know I've done hearings and stuff like that, but I don't think I've been in front of a jury with him. He's very likable. He's, easy to get along with. I get the feeling he comes across great to a jury, even though I haven't seen him in front of one. And he's a good lawyer.
Yeah, I think that's what mentor lawyers said.
Yeah, more than competent, more than able to handle this case, has definitely handled multiple other homicides. I think he's been practicing like maybe 5 or 6 years longer than I have. I mean, he's got plenty of experience. He's the kind of person that you should hire on a case like this.
Okay. Well, I did want to ask you, do you happen to know Wendy's friend, Sarah, or former friend, Sarah Youssef?
No. They would have been in law school a couple of years before me. And I don't know who that person is. I get the feeling that, my friends that are a couple years older than I am that went to the University of Miami might know her. I did reach out to a friend of mine who I know was at the University of Miami during those years to see if she knew her. And that person said, no, I was far too interested in Miami than I was much more interested in Miami than I was in the University of Miami Law School when I was living down there. So said there was not as much interaction with the classmates and a little bit more interaction with South Beach.
Yeah. And so how did you and your other law school friends react when you first heard about the whole Dan Markel case?
So I had a friend that was in the sex crimes unit with me in Broward who said my old professor got murdered, and I didn't go to FSU, but it was somebody who was, I think, a year or two under me at the state attorney's office, and we were in the special unit together, and those who had attended FSU and had him in the state attorney's office, and I would assume that there's quite a few prosecutors, public defenders, people out there who had him as a professor. And he was a first-year professor. And those are the ones that, as you know, Judy, those are the ones that like just needle you, make you want to cry, make you like strategically use the bathroom when they start hitting your area of the alphabet. They're there to torture you a little bit and to needle you and make sure that you can actually hang and stay in law school. I have warm, fuzzy feelings thinking about my first year criminal law professor, especially having gone into criminal law myself. I have warm, fuzzy feelings. I'm still in contact with my old criminal procedure professor. So, I mean, somebody that went into that line of work, that was kind of the thought, but I put it out of my mind and went on with my day. Was in Tallahassee. And then they started arresting people in Broward. So we all started kind of paying attention to it. And at that point in time, I had done some work with MAGTAF, which was the multi-agency gang task force. So I remember my ears going up a little bit because of the Latin King aspect of it.
And from the beginning, did you think that the whole Adelson family, minus Rob, were involved with Dan's murder?
So I didn't really have an opinion on it until I went up to the state attorney's office here. And I, for the longest time, I don't think I did have an opinion. I know what it looks like, but, I'm capable of keeping an open mind. If other information comes out that leads me to believe that maybe they've been charged improperly, I'm open to that. And no, I'm not trying to get picked for the jury. So
that's what I'm thinking. Like, I don't think you would get picked for a jury.
No, they would. Yeah, they'd take one look at me and say, "Get out." Yeah. But like I said, practicing criminal law, you have to, my ability to be shocked is gone. There's room in my head in every case. I just went to meet with somebody today where I assumed, made an assumption about what was on the papers and left the jail with a completely different idea of what we were going to be doing in this case. So, and it, two sides to every story. I think it's fascinating in that, it was brilliant to use the bus cameras. I think that the fact that they, in South Florida, I discussed this with Jay at one point in time. Like, I'm from South Florida. If I hear a gunshot, I'm not going outside to check on my neighbors. But people up here do that because they care about their neighbors. And I'm not saying the people in South Florida don't care about their neighbors. It's just kind of you don't want to get involved thing. It's an urban area. It's like the bystander effect. And it occurs to me, and my husband and I have, my husband who lived in South Florida with me, then moved up here, and then I joined him. So we've had this discussion so many times about the difference between South Florida and the South. And we both had the discussion of, if they hadn't been from Miami, if they had been from up here, they probably would have done it under cover of darkness or something like that. They would know that this is a small town full of people who have lived here, minus me, for a long time, who care about the safety of their neighbors in ways that people in big cities sometimes don't and don't want to get involved. So the neighbor, I think, was the thing that they didn't plan on. They didn't plan that somebody was actually going to go over and check on him when he was in his garage with the garage door up, walk into the garage, call him by his name. That's, I think that was really the end of it. That,
Mm-hmm.
maybe this would have gone unsolved if it happened in Dade County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big thanks to Mr. Geiger for being a good neighbor and going over there and calling 911.
Yeah. And going into his neighbor's garage when the car was running and he saw him sitting in there, like, you have to kind of know your neighbors to be able to be like, you know what, I'm going to check on him.
Yeah.
And when I lived in South Florida, I didn't know who lived next to me in the condo next door to me. I would make eye contact with them on the way to the elevator. But, up here, yeah, I know exactly all of my neighbors' names and which direction they're in and the names of their spouses and the names of their dogs.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you got to Tallahassee, did you feel sort of like Wendi allegedly did and think that, oh, this is horrible, I want to move, when do I get to go back?
No, people are nice here. I think I had the opposite. I was like, wow, this is a really, and other people have brought this up, this is a really nice place to raise a family. Like, you could feel safe here. This is a place to set down roots. I'm not telling you I would never move back to Fort Lauderdale. That's home for me. But, somebody in the courthouse stopped me in an elevator and asked, it said something to me about the weather as we were going into a parking garage. And I was like, oh man, I moved here and now I'm getting robbed. And it turned out, no, he was, concerned and said, make sure that you, watch it. We've got some severe weather coming through later on today. And they said they could drop a tornado or two. And I was just like,
that's nice.
Like, I'm sure I mean, the moral of the story is maybe I'm the a-hole in all of this, but there's, it's Southern, it's nice. People talk to each other. You talk to the person who's checking out your groceries. You talk to somebody who's at the buying milk next to you. It's odd. I mean, well, it's odd for me coming up here, and now it's wild. My mother, when I had a baby, came up here, and she grew up on Long Island and then moved to South Florida, and she was like, people are nice here. It was beyond, and she was like, and they're smart.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear.
It's not dumb country bumpkins. It's a college town, and it actually has the highest education level in the state of Florida, like most college towns.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Bichon Mama and all the people out there have been very patient, waiting for their questions to be answered. So she asked, the prosecution could present witnesses at an Arthur hearing, correct?
Yeah. Now, you're allowed to present a packet. I always used to call it an Arthur packet, where you put together the police reports, and in this case, I assume it's going to be an Arthur binder at the very least for the judge to look at, because hearsay is admissible, and you're just allowed to give the judge a flavor of your case. Additionally, Judge Everett has presided over Charlie's trial, and he's able to, because Donna's charged as a co-defendant, he can take into consideration the evidence against Charlie, and as a jurist, he can disregard the evidence that didn't pertain to Donna. But yes, that you can present witnesses at an Arthur hearing. I have done it more frequently in sex crimes cases, where somebody definitely wanted to testify, to ask the judge to keep somebody in custody, because we have something called Marcy's Law in Florida, where the victims get input. And there are some, there's some victims who would want to testify and want to beg the judge to keep this person in custody, or maybe the parent of the victim who want to ask for that. I don't think we're going to see witnesses, because the nature of this case, going after it piecemeal, every time you testify under oath, and every time you testify, period, you're creating a new transcript that you can be impeached with later. So I can't imagine that the state wants to create another way to impeach their own witnesses again. There's plenty of ways. You've got Katie 1, Katie 2, Charlie, police reports, depositions that all the defense attorneys have taken. I mean, by the time we're here, you've got probably 5, 6, 7 transcripts of some of the major witnesses. So I can't imagine you would put somebody on the stand unless there is a new major piece of evidence that you want to make sure you get in.
Mm-hmm. So do you think these motions are going to be heard tomorrow during the case management hearing?
I think they're already set.
Oh, okay.
I thought I saw a notice on there, but I was reading it on my phone, so it's also possible that this is the year I end up with reading glasses.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't had time to check either. So let me see. Here I have it. Motion. Yeah, it says, the motion to suppress Arthur hearing, that's February 26th.
26th, okay.
Yeah, 9 in the morning.
It's already set.
Yes, on the 26th, but tomorrow is just a case management at 2:30. So, okay. What about this older question that LJ asked quite a while ago? This is sort of a different topic. In my opinion, Katie McManuel's attorney did not have privilege when she called Sigfredo. Oh, so yeah, this has to do with Terica Wasp making a phone call to Sigfredo before Katie's trial back in 2022. Do you agree? My understanding, there's no joint defense agreement in place. Okay, do you get what this person is talking about?
I get what they're getting at. I just don't know what evidence would have been gleaned from that.
Okay, so what people suspect what happened was that originally Terica Wasp was trying to get Sigfredo to come and testify for Katie at her trial back in 2022. And then that phone call, I guess, was recorded, and ultimately Wasp decided not to call Sigfredo. So people are just suspecting that maybe she was trying to coach Sigfredo on what to say in court, potentially. So, I mean, wouldn't that still be privileged, though? Because you could still say that at that point she was trying to give legal advice to him, maybe.
Well, she's not his attorney, so there's a conflict there, but there's also work product privilege too. So, the same way that like if I talk to a witness and I take notes and I decide not to call them, you can't get into my notes, you can't get into my brain, you can't get into my theory of the case because I'm a defense attorney, and you need to be careful about trying to do that when you're the state. You're not trying to intrude upon work product privilege. And I assume that that's what she would claim. That, for example, like I listen to 300 hours of phone calls and take notes as to what I think is important. The state's not entitled to discover my notes. The state's not entitled to discover what I am doing to prepare for the case. Obviously, coaching a witness bad, but there's the flip side of, well, you shouldn't be able to look into my brain to figure out what I think is important and what I'm asking this witness as part of my trial prep. So there wouldn't be attorney-client privilege, but there might be work product privilege given the fact that he either, I don't know if he was listed as a witness, but either he was listed as a witness or he was a potential witness.
Yeah, I think he was supposed to be a potential witness,
Mm-hmm.
and they decided not to call him. Yes.
For Katie too? Yeah. So
Yeah,
I mean,
Katie
he would have been listed as a witness then.
Okay. Well, what if that phone call had taken place on one of those recorded lines, though? Then would that waive the privilege? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot, but do you know?
It depends. So like if the same way that like when I get a call from the jail, it's a number, I recognize it, it's saved in my phone under, like it's the jail. And when I get a phone call like that, I always check with my client, hey, was this recorded? Was it not recorded? Or like, did it say that this will not be recorded under Securus? And I've had several like fairly astute clients. I think they switched over the jail system at some point. My phone calls were recorded at one point where they had switched from one system to another. And then I had to email them and get back on the non-recording list. So most attorneys, even if your phone call is listed as a non-recording number, and I get the feeling that even though they were in Miami, they were in this case for so long and Katie was in custody for so long that they're, every number they could possibly have was listed as a do not record number for the jail. I get the feeling that they were not discussing anything important on the phone calls. If it's something that's like strategy or something like you want to talk about that in person, that's worth a visit as opposed to discussing it on the phone, because you're relying on technology doing things correctly, and it's fairly impossible to unring the bell. In fact, when I first started as a prosecutor, we had a little issue with defense attorneys' phone calls getting recorded in the jail in Broward County. And so there's some case law there about the entire state attorney's office getting removed from the case on a couple of homicides because there was a defense attorney who had like a back line to his office and a front line so that you could put somebody on hold, and there was a different phone number. So if you dialed into one of their additional numbers, it wasn't on the do not record list. And one of the homicide prosecutors listened to those phone calls. And a state attorney's office got kicked off of every case where something like that had occurred.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thanks for reminding us about the work product privilege. Yeah. Okay. What about this? Does the jail provide documentation upon request of itemization of what Donna's buying from the canteen? There's probably some record of whatever paper form she has to fill out, right?
Right. So her medical records would be privileged, but I don't think that the items that there's at least an argument that the items that she's buying from the canteen are not privileged. And certainly the fact that she's included that in her motion waives that privilege. You can't list it in your motion and claim privilege if you're the defendant. And I would also imagine that it is entirely possible that there's going to be more medical records and stuff like that are attached to these motions that maybe kind of shed some light on her medical issues a little bit better than those motions do. Because if you recall, Mr. Zellman said that, I didn't want to put this motion to perpetuate testimony. I didn't want to flesh this out that well because I was afraid of the news getting a hold of it. And guess what?
Yeah.
He's a great lawyer. I get it. He doesn't want to pollute the jury pool, but unless you've got a reason to seal something in the state of Florida, it's going to be out. We have an incredibly broad public records laws. They're called sunshine laws in the state of Florida. And that's part of the reason you know about Florida Man, because when somebody in Florida does something crazy, you can get your hands on all the police reports. So long way to getting to, I think that there is a way to get the itemization.
Yes. Yeah. And come to think of it, once again, I keep mentioning True Lifestyles because she's a YouTuber who has done a lot of work and spent some of her own money getting these jail records on Katie, Sigfredo, Charlie, and Donna. And I remember she did get even those book requests. Remember when Sigfredo was trying to get chicken soup for the prisoner's soul, and Katie was requesting some sort of Christian Living magazine, and, you know, upset because her honey bun had mold on it, you know, requesting flip-flops and bigger underwear. So, yeah, so I'm sure that's stuff that could potentially be requested. So,
yeah,
we'll see.
I'm sure they'll try to claim some kind of privilege, or, I mean, just because something is able to be released doesn't mean that there's not going to be some kind of redactions. Like, I mean, I'm sure if Harvey's putting money on her canteen with his credit card online, I think there's a way to do that through Securus or through JailPay, or JPay, you know, that certainly his credit card number would be redacted. And certainly like things like her social security number will be redacted.
Of course.
So,
yeah. Okay. Oh, so Esty says, don't they have cameras in the jail? Well, they're saying there are no cameras in the shower.
Yeah.
What about,
for obvious reasons.
Yeah, exactly. What about the washing machines? Do you think they would have cameras where this washing machine would be? Or done? Well, I guess that's not too relevant because she's not saying she was assaulted there.
Right. I believe there probably are cameras. I haven't been by the washing machines, but keep in mind that there's like, it's almost like a mothership for those of you who have not been to the jail. Usually it's a low lighting area of the jail that has tinting on the windows. And then the rest of the jail is all lit up. So they try to use that, the fishbowl effect to protect what they're looking at. But there's all kinds of cameras that individuals are watching in the jail. So I can't tell you that there's a camera next to the washing machine, but I would imagine so. In fact, as I was, leaving the jail today, I looked up in the ceiling in the elevator and was like, oh, eye in the sky. Hey, they're everywhere, but not in restrooms or showers or for obvious reasons.
Okay. Yeah. Let me scroll down. Do you have to get going? I just realized we're almost at an hour and a half.
I have gotten dispensation to stay as long as I would like.
Thank you. Thank you so much. LJ loves you. Thank you, LJ. You have a keeper here, permanent guest. No, I think Law and Crime will probably try to get their hands on you. But please come back and keep talking.
So there's it's really good to do these kinds of things, or to pay attention to other emotions and stuff when you're an attorney. Because I used to exercise these parts of my mind all the time when I was a prosecutor, because every case was slightly different. But now I've only got, X number of cases, and I do a lot of sex crimes defense. So I'm focused in on that. And I really haven't exercised the Arthur hearing part of my brain in a while. So it's good. It turns you into a better lawyer too.
Yeah. How did you get in touch with Law and Crime?
Oh, actually, I remember speaking to them about, I was always interested in doing some kind of streaming thing, because gosh, if I could have a job where I just talked smack about other lawyers all day long and not have to leave my house, that would be amazing. And I slightly kid, because I would still want to practice law. But so I was just like, you know what, if I'm going to be paying attention to these cases, I'm listening to these commentators, I got some stuff to say too. So, I mean, they don't pay their guests or anything like that, but it's fun. And it exercises parts of your brain that you don't usually exercise. And for me, I mean, card carrying dweeb, I think that's fun for me.
Okay. Well, I think you already tactfully answered this, but do you want to talk a little about your opinion about the evidence against Wendi?
I will tell you that I've only been on Truscott Drive to look at property. It's not a shortcut, but I get why they haven't charged her yet. I mean, she is the most concise way to bring in all of this other evidence against the other co-conspirators. So I get it. And by going after them piecemeal, my God, look at Donna basically imploded. When she thought she might get arrested, she went to Vietnam and the recording and all the crazy things that she did in the interim, like getting her, act together, the finances. I'm sure we're going to hear all kinds of information about what she did with the finances, about trusts for the children, to show that this was not a vacation. And especially now that they've included that they're trying to call it a vacation. Yeah, I know I put all my assets in trust before I go on vacation. So I'm sure that'll come out too at trial. And it's something that may not have been relevant if they had just conceded that she was trying to flee. But I realize I'm rambling here, and Judy told me to talk more than she did because of her voice.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, but here's the next question. Can Donna be reprimanded for abusing the system? No. I mean, well, there are defendants that can be labeled vexatious litigants, where you might be, but usually they're pro se, meaning they're representing themselves. So, in fact, I recall one defendant of mine who drew snakes on all the pleadings and filed them, and he was labeled as that. But this is, I mean, look, you can think that it's dumb for her to say, well, I didn't get a Band-Aid. I mean, it's at least, there's something colorable there. I don't know if it has any, I don't know if it's ever going to be granted, any of these motions. But it's an argument, and her lawyers feel like they need to make it. So,
yeah, she's got lawyers who are doing their job to advocate for her.
And we should not talk smack about her lawyers for doing their job. We want them to do their job.
Right. What do you think is the item of evidence that shows an act in furtherance against Wendi? Well, the first thing I think of is her getting Dan's schedule, or giving Dan's schedule and whereabouts to either Charlie or Katie somehow to help the shooters.
Yeah. So yeah, it's something, if you could prove that, and that would be the only way to
if
get
we can prove it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that would be the only way that information was found. Yeah, absolutely. But he also had a girlfriend. There were also, like, I think that he was going to a conference, so I don't know if there were other ways to get access to, and you've seen them kind of go through those things, and kind of test out those theories in previous trials. I would have to imagine that there's other stuff we don't know on this case, that's out there that they have not tested in court yet, because it hasn't been relevant to whatever defendant has been up.
Okay. Do you feel like people in Tallahassee know about Dan Markel and this whole murder case? Have non-lawyers talked about it?
I'm a lawyer married to a lawyer, so whose friends are mostly lawyers. So,
okay, so you don't know what the everyday Joe.
Yeah, it would not shock me to find out that, I mean, first of all, it's a college town, so people rotate in and out of here. You might live here for 2 years after graduation and then leave. So, as far as the jury pool goes, is what you're referring to, I'm assuming. Yeah, there's plenty of people that have heard of it, but haven't formed a distinct opinion on it. There's, like, for example, those of you who are watching from South Florida, we have 4 or 5 local news stations down there. You got Local 10, you got NBC6, you got WSVN, you got CBS 4, and I'm sure I'm missing one that's come up since I've been down there. Here we have one, and they go on once a day they go on for 30 minutes at I think 5 and 5:30, and then it turns into Wheel of Fortune. So, there's a lot of local news here that is not, as in your face as it might be in a larger city. And there's a lot of people that move to Tallahassee to raise their kids, and the local news is not on their radar, other than, where the school bus routes are and what's under construction right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, and just name dropping, do you know the other people in town who have been covering the Markel case?
Do I?
Like Jared Ross or Patty.
Yeah, Jared went to law school with my husband. Jared went to law school with my husband. They know each other from that.
Oh, okay.
I know Tim. I work with Tim.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Let's see, who else?
Patty Wilson from Patty's Playhouse, or
I don't know her. James, I can pick out of a lineup, mostly from the courthouse and from his channel. I don't know him very well, though.
Mm-hmm.
I do know he's a tennis player.
Do you play tennis?
No, specifically, no. But I do have a kid that I feel like I'm going to try to force to play tennis.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely seems a little unusual that this one criminal case has drawn so many people who are so, fixated on justice for Dan Markel. And I mean, do you think it's kind of weird because you handle so many criminal cases every year that people from all over the world are interested in this case?
So there's so many interesting people that are involved in this case, and then there's so many trials that have occurred, and I think that Wendi is kind of the enigma here, if I can be so bold. I don't know what she knew and when she knew it. I also she must have gone over her prior testimony, and she has just said some things that are so diametrically opposed in testimony that it's, it kind of makes your brain think, like, what's going on here? Is there some kind of a game she's playing, or God forbid, was it nerves? Why would you, if you went down the road because it was a shortcut back in 2014, then it should remain the same answer in 2018, in 2022. And it seems like the answer has kind of changed over time. So I mean, I think that's what's interesting. For me, the tale of two cities kind of thing is that, like, you don't really understand. There's a big difference between South Florida and Tallahassee. I mean, we're all part of the same crazy state, but there's the further north you go, the further south you get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, how did Tim get all swept up into the whole Dan Markel case, though? Because I think he just started showing up on Surviving the Survivor a year or two ago, and now he's everywhere. Do you happen to know the backstory on that?
I don't really. I think that he had gotten some tip that there was an arrest that was made while the show was on the air, and that was the real start of it. I think it may have been Donna's arrest. I also know he broke his ribs last fall.
Biking accident. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what he did, but anyway, he broke his ribs in multiple different ways. I think he broke like 5 of them, but he couldn't drive. He couldn't practice law. He couldn't do anything. So he could talk into a microphone, though. And I think that was kind of what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised. There was some show where Tim was on, maybe it was Surviving the Survivor, and you popped up in the back scene. And I was like, oh, I didn't know she worked for Tim, because I only knew you from showing up on Jay, what does he call himself?
I like him.
Jay Proteus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was their resident millennial to their techie for that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's been a really interesting lifestyle shift to go out on my own, and I'm really grateful for somebody who gave me office space, and for the clients that came with me, and for the ability to just kind of run my own life for a little bit. And it's just been, I mean, you're a sole practitioner too, right?
Yes. Yeah, since 2006. So I'll give you some of my war stories or tips, maybe through email. So we don't need to bore
yeah,
yeah,
but it's like
it's a solo practice. Yeah.
You'll work 80 hours a week, but you get to pick which 80.
Yeah, exactly.
Really,
I feel like
great.
I work on weekends, I work at night, responding to emails at 10 p.m. That's
scheduling them to go out at 8 a.m. so you don't look insane.
Right? Oh, well, I think I just look insane anyway. I don't care about timing my emails, so it doesn't look like I'm constantly working. I would send emails to some clients at like 3 a.m. sometimes, and they'd be like, wow, you're working at 3 a.m. I'm like, see how hard I'm working on your case, so.
Or I couldn't sleep and I might as well get a couple things done.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, one last question for real. Does Katie think Donna attempting to flee is the smoking gun, or just another piece of the whole puzzle?
I think that she's going to take the stand and say something to the effect. I'm not, and don't come for me. I this is not my opinion, but I think that she will be very sympathetic on the stand. She'll come across as a grandma and say, "Look at how they railroaded my baby boy." With this conviction he didn't deserve. And I knew they would do the same thing for me. And I know Charlie's going to win that appeal, but I don't have that many good years left. And I deserve to live those out with my husband, the love of my life, and, and not in the jail. And I have all these health problems. It'll be all about that like, I know they're coming for me. I didn't do it, but I also know that a Tallahassee jury would convict me or something like that. But Tallahassee is full of government workers and rule followers. Like that is the biggest thing that I got from moving here. I once lost a trafficking and heroin case in South Florida where it was in his butt. Okay. And the jurors were like, "Oh, sorry, we just didn't like your cops very much, so we acquitted him. Do you want to come to Applebee's with us?" And I was shocked. And up here, it's a very different. I know there was a comment about Tallahassee being a very liberal area, but it's a liberal area in that it's very well educated, but there's a lot of rule followers. Like there's a lot of respect for police and elected officials that maybe you wouldn't get in South Florida with some of the populations down there that have had very bad experiences with police. So I think that you're far more likely to get a conviction in Tallahassee than you are in South Florida. And I also think that extortion defense may have flown in Miami or Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Well, I'd love to have you on some more. And like I said, I'll be glad to share with you some of my tips of struggling to start a, because when I first started my practice, I was like so bored out of my mind, just sitting around waiting for the phone to ring, that I started thinking maybe I should work at Target or Starbucks part-time, so I'm not just sitting around wondering like, okay, I have 5 clients and what else am I gonna do? I mean, it's kind of scary at first.
Yeah, it is. If I hadn't been, we hadn't had the discussion, we're like, yeah, we could live on one income, maybe, probably. That I would not have been brave enough to do this. So hats off to my husband for that. But yeah, it's been, I've been building out like software and stuff. Like I said, token millennial here. So I've been like building out software. So now I can type 3 letters and have a notice of appearance populate. And I was very proud of that. And that probably took me a good 6 hours to do that. So I better have enough clients to where that actually, ends up.
You will. You will.
Yeah.
Are you on the court appointed list also?
No, I am not. As of this point in time, I probably will get on there later on this year. I think it has to do with the fiscal year. You can't get on until like May or June. And I would be happy to take those, at least until I get sufficiently busy. They are kind of a pain to get reimbursed for and to get paid on, I have heard.
Yeah.
I haven't done it personally.
Yeah.
But I mean, for a reason, they don't want to make it easy to, bill the state for your defense.
Yeah, we had that same problem where I am, but I only did a tiny bit of court-appointed work, mainly like child support enforcement defense when I first started out, just to try to make a few extra bucks or something. But I was really glad when business finally took off and I no longer had to do that kind of work.
So I do some crossover, or I have done some crossover work with family attorneys. And I do recall leaving a meeting with one of them where I was like, I think it was right around the time that there was an attorney that had been murdered in Atlanta. And I was like, well, they might try to kill me, but they'll probably go after you first. And we kind of shook on that one. That was that kind of gallows humor because, I think family law is one of the more dangerous for attorneys. And it's also one of the ones where people burn out so quickly. So for you to be in private practice for so long is really admirable.
Yeah, I guess I can feel proud of that I haven't gone out of business, and it's been,
and you haven't burned out either.
19 years. Well, there are some days, but luckily being solo has kept me saner than I could have been if I stayed working for someone else.
Yeah,
so it's kind of good to be able to think like, okay, I want to just reject this potential client. I don't want to do this case. Whereas when I was working for other people, you had no choice in your clients. So that's why it's great to be solo.
And the thing that I have tried to take to heart from my parents and from my older colleagues is you always regret the cases you take, not the ones you don't.
Yeah, it's better.
2 years down the line, you're going to regret saying yes.
Yeah, and don't get paid than to do the work and still not get paid. That's also another saying that I've heard. So, yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Katie. I do have to run, but really, really appreciate you helping out on such a last minute notice. So
happy to do it, and good to see everybody. And I'm sure we'll see everybody on the 26th too.
Yeah. Hopefully, I think Deep Dive True Crime as well as STS will probably cover tomorrow's hearing, 2:30. Okay.
But I wouldn't expect anything to happen. So
anyway, we'll see. Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Right.
We'll be in touch. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Justice for Dan. Bye.